Good evening. It is 6:30 p.m. and I'd like to call this meeting of the Community Development Committee to order. While this meeting is being held in person, in consideration of the ongoing COVID-19 health considerations, we are offering the option for the public to attend virtually if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. The public is also invited to participate in this meeting. If you are participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are part of our in-person group tonight, please raise your hand and stay seated and we will call on you to go to the lectern to make your comment. When you make your comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Also, please be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the admin offices at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. First, we have a revised agenda for this evening. And Ms. Randall, would you please share the proposed agenda changes with us? Or I guess Laura, if she's not here. Yeah, but
Thank you, everyone. We did want to revise the Community Development Committee meeting just to move the item ordinance clarifying trail use and micromobility devices from an action item to a discussion item. So that's the change we're proposing for this evening.
thank you, Emily. Is there a motion to approve the revised agenda? All right. Audrey, please call the roll.
Tosig.
Aye.
Inman. Aye. Boltinghouse.
Aye.
Ryherd.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Davis. Loudon
Aye.
and Crane. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. We will now proceed with the agenda as revised. Our first item of business is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment now? All right, seeing none online or in person, we will now proceed to the public presentation informational only section of our agenda. We have 3 public presentations this evening. The first one is the proposed design concept for the new Rushton Elementary School. Mr. Scott, will you please provide your report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rushton Elementary School is located at 6001 West 52nd Street in Mission. It is one of 34 elementary schools in the Shawnee Mission School District. Service area encompasses most of Mission from Knoll Avenue to Metcalf and I-35 to Shawnee Mission Parkway. There's approximately 360 students that attend Rushton kindergarten through 6th grade. The school was built in 1954. It's about 50,000 square feet and it sits on a site that's about 6.64 acres. Several years ago, the Shawnee Mission School District undertook a community-wide strategic planning process. As part of this process, they undertook an evaluation of their 10 oldest elementary schools, including Rushton. They found in the evaluation that there are a number of deficiencies that do not allow the school to meet standards for modern-day elementary schools. A couple are no room for small group instruction, current collaboration space is poor, no public common space, cafeteria and kitchen are undersized, limited technology, and a noisy and inefficient HVAC system. So with this, the strategic plan recommended that Rushton be one of 5 elementary schools that be rebuilt. And this recommendation was ruled into a $264 million bond issue that was approved by the voters last spring. Insight Design Studio has been selected as the architects to work on developing a new Rushton Elementary School. They began this process last summer, and this past fall, they began meeting with teachers, parents, and community leaders to develop plans for a new school. Councilmember Kring and I were part of one of the parent community leader meetings. We met probably 4 or 5 times on a Tuesday night at the school. And the folks from inside just kind of took us through a process. You can imagine what the perfect school would be like, and sort of narrowed down to a final design concept. We're kind of nearing the point now where they're going to present that to the Planning Commission. I had put in the packet May, looks like probably more like June. We're still working through some final costing details. But nevertheless, we're going to have a neighborhood meeting here in the near future. And then we wanted to kind of give you all a sneak peek tonight at the proposed concept for school and answer any first blush questions that you might have. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dwayne Cash from Insight and his associate.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for having us. We appreciate the opportunity to talk about this exciting building. As was mentioned, the building was quite a challenge. A lot of that was due with the site, but the challenges we're dealing with today. Can I advance this? What's that? Next. One of the challenges is several. One is the site. It's a very odd shaped site. It's a small site, 7 acres. If we were building a brand new building today, we probably wouldn't build anything less than 15 acres. But it's very important to keep it in this neighborhood. So we were tasked with the challenge of finding a design that fit the neighborhood character and also worked with the site. And then the other big challenge, of course, is budget. Since last July, we've seen increases up to 20% and some much more higher than that on costing. So the district is really struggling with that to meet the promises of the bond issue for all their projects. And this one is being impacted in that same fashion. So we're in that process right now of looking at what ways we can keep the important things that were decided during that community meeting, staff meetings, keep that fabric of the building, the look of the building, but reduce costs at the same time. So that's where we're at, and that's why we're probably going to be pushed till June before we're ready to go to the planning commission. This is the existing site plan, and the reason I have this big slide is to show you where it really sits. It really does sit in the neighborhood. It's not. It's off of Lamar by a couple of blocks. The street right to the west is a very narrow residential street, and that street gets full of cars at pickup time at night. So the cars are lined up on that street all the way down 52nd Street as they come into the building. So it's really a big issue to get as many of these cars off the streets that we can. It's something that the staff would like to have happen, and also the neighbors. Next slide, please. This is a blow up of the actual site that's there today. To the west of the existing building is a little bit of a rise, and that's the play fields. They get used quite a bit by the neighborhood. Then there's the playground. That one of the hardest playground surfaces actually works as the parent drop-off loop and pickup loop, but it's also a playground space as well. Then you can see the building with an interior courtyard. The courtyard's a kind of a special thing for the staff and community, but we just don't build buildings with courtyards anymore because they're just hard to maintain. They have a lot of bad air movement in them, those types of things. So they really wanted to kind of keep that look and feel of a courtyard if we could. So some of the other things that it also attaches to Waterworks Park to the east. Waterworks Park is, very, I think, is integrated a little bit to this site, and it's pros and it has some cons as well for the staff. One of the cons is a lot of the kids hang out there after school, and there is some behavior issues with that. Also, maybe some babysitting issues with that. That they're concerned about, and there's not much we can do except they can manage that. We can't really fix that with architecture, but we do want to keep that connection to that park, especially for the walking trails aspect of the building. Yep. Okay. Yep. Go ahead. So this is the proposed site plan of the new building. To the west, the building slid to the west and a little bit back to the south. And the new drop-off lane and pickup lane, it goes around the parking lot on the west side. And you'll notice there's 3 lanes of traffic. And that is designed to keep 2 lanes would be the stacking lanes. Instead of having to stack on the street, they would stack inside that parking lot. The innermost 3rd lane is the pass-through lane. So if I need to come to school, which I do for meetings during pickup time, it's really hard to get to the school and get to someplace to park because of all the street parking. So this would allow somebody like me or somebody else that needs to come during that stacking time to enter the parking lot, park, and go in the building. Or if I'm in that stacking lane, be able to pull out into that 3rd lane and leave if I have to, if there's an emergency. Otherwise, you're kind of stuck. So as they come towards the building to that entrance, those 2 lanes merge down to a 1 and a zipper, and the kids are dropped off or picked up, and then they leave in a nice orderly fashion. We have done a informal traffic count. We've been there on a cold, rainy day and counted all the cars that were stacked up for that day and that came through. And that is what we've designed to get as many of those cars on this lot during those times of periods. I think it's like 60 some cars. This neighborhood has a lot of walkers. There's a lot of kids who walk to school every day. And then there's a lot of there's one bus that comes to school, so not a lot of bus riders. So either they're being dropped off, picked up, or they're walking to school. There is a little bit of issue with some parents who, kind of circumvent the command chain. They park down the street and away, and the kids walk to that car. Not much we can do about that either. Towards the back of the building, we have 2 dedicated playground spaces. We have a hard play and a soft play. The one on the west side is for the little kids. That is that side of the building. This kindergartens, 1st and 2nd graders in a 1-story structure. And then on the east side of the building, or the right hand side of the building, is a 2-story structure that would house 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. So they have their separate playgrounds and the size for those appropriate grade levels and ages. On the very far east side is a gymnasium. That gymnasium is an ICC 500 FEMA rated shelter. Mission does not require that in the code yet. When they adopt the 2018 code, which I understand may be in the process at some point, that would be a requirement. But today it's not. But the district has chosen to go ahead and go that extra step and make this meet that code level, because we've done it in other jurisdictions and they want to have parity. Parity is a big item for the school district. They want to make sure every kid, doesn't matter what part of the city they're from or part of the district they're from, that they have a level of parity. So that we're going to hear that a lot probably in the design. The building is going to be LEED certified. The goal of the district has decided to make all their buildings LEED that certified. The level of LEED is really up to the USGBC when they score the building. And that is a concern again as well, that the buildings all have some kind of a parity. It's hard to do when a 3rd party jurisdictional body kind of comes in and scores the building and they determine what the LEED status is. So we could have a building that's LEED silver, we could have a building that's LEED gold, we could have LEED one. The building's just certified, but the goal is to be certified at some level. The building is also, let's go to the next slide so we can actually see the rendering of what it might look like. So here's a bird's eye view of the building, just to kind of give you an idea of what the building might look like on the street. It's not really a good interpretation of what it would look like to you and I driving or walking, but just a kind of a massing perspective of the bird's eye view. So you can see on the right-hand side, that'd be that parent pickup drop-off parking lot area. And then right there in the front corner is 52nd Street. And we have on-street parking there that they have some of that now. It's really nice. It kind of breaks up that a little bit and makes it feel very community anchored. Another one of the things we heard a lot from the parents and the staff was they really love their 1-story building. It's very nice and it fits in really well with the neighborhood, that low building. But we are going to a bigger building. It's going to house more kids. So to do that, we have to create a 2-story element. But we put that 2-story element in the back, farther away from the street, and with a 1-story to the front. So it feels like it fits in the neighborhood to the front and to this side of the community. The taller pieces are towards the back at Waterworks Park. Next slide. This is what the building would look like for most people as they drive up to the building or walk towards the building. This is the front entrance. You can see on the right-hand side or left-hand side, the little bit taller piece with butterfly roof, where the roof kind of slopes back instead of looking forward, with some nice glass, a lot of nice natural light. And that's the cafeteria you see in there on the left-hand side. The right-hand side would be the administration, and then right in the middle would be the entrance with the secure entry for safe entry of the kids during the day and visitors for that matter. The sign is something that we're not quite sure about yet. There's a lot of worry about vandalism and people climbing on it, skateboards, all those kinds of things. We like the look of it. We just don't know if this is the design right now. The sign might go up on the building. It might be some kind of a maybe embedded thing where it can't be vandalized or more robust. We just don't know at this point. So the general look of the building, but the sign's something we don't know about just yet. Potentially, that's what we're looking at, different options like that. We're a little worried that it might come a little brutalist if it's like a wall. Then we don't want it to feel like a wall. We want it to feel more like a stand. So we're looking at several options. Next slide. Thank you. This is the student entrance, the parent pickup drop-off entrance. And you'll see in the plan in a little bit that they're connected very closely. The front entrance and the side entrance, and the administration sits between the two of them so that they can monitor who's coming in the building during the parent pickup and drop off as well. Staff members always stationed there to make sure that the kids are getting their cars, coming out of the cars safely, and that people are being orderly in how they go. So safety is a very big concern. So that's the administration to the left. To the right is that first story wing where the kindergartners, first and second graders are at. Next slide. This is the back of the building, that kind of the courtyard feel that they really wanted. And this is what we're seeing. The main image here is the media center and outdoor classroom space. When we were going through this with the community and staff, they really wanted an outdoor learning environment. And we had one in the center here where this planting is now. But through this process we're going through to see if we can save some money, we've actually embedded that into a covered piece of the building itself now. So you can see on the rendering on the left-hand side is the media center. And then there's two bays on the end that are open. So it's like a covered patio out there. And that's really, I think, a better solution for kids. There's not a lot of great days in Kansas where it's perfect weather outside. The elements in the sun are always an issue. This gives them some protection, but also the outdoor environment feel. And we can condition that space with some unit heaters if we need to. We can also put some fans out there to make it much more pleasant, usable longer in the year, stretch that time out when it's a usable space. But during this cost cutting, during the cost savings, yeah. It was basically where you see these plantings in the front where the pavement is. It was generally in that area, and it was accessed by both classroom wings very easily. They could come out between those two spaces and use that for a lot of variety. And we think that they could use it for after hours events as well. There was a lot of things there. So we're still trying to keep that plaza kind of a feel and that connected feel, but we just won't have a covering over it now. That structure, that independent structure. So that it'll still be connected. That outdoor classroom will still be connected to that indoor. Right, it just won't be standalone. And then there's also another advantage of bringing it a little bit closer to the building. It's more connected to the cafeteria. So if a class wants to eat outside, they can just walk across the hallway from the cafeteria to this outdoor environment, or they can come out farther out if it's a really nice day out to this outside outdoor plaza. Yeah, they do not know that yet. Yeah, we will. We'll be going back to that committee here soon once we understand what the actual final design of the building looks like and all the cost cutting measures have come into play. At some point, I will be able to, yeah, once we have an estimate from our construction manager, yes. But we're looking at millions of dollars we're trying to cut. Yep. Next slide. This is the main level floor plan of the building. I kind of try to orient you a little bit. The top is 52nd Street. So the top of the screen is 52nd Street. The left hand is that parent drop off and pickup parking lot and zone. The wing that's coming down at an angle is that kindergarten, first and second grade. You can see that there is still a hallway there in that wings to get you to that direct access, that interior courtyard space. And then as we move around, that the gray piece up on the top left corner, that's the administration and teachers lounge space, nurse's office. Adjacent to that, across from the secure entrance, is the cafeteria. And then the beyond that is the kitchen and back of house support spaces. The yellow spaces, the two yellow spaces out in front, are the media center and music room. And then that little white chunk in the middle between those two yellow pieces is that outdoor classroom that I was describing a minute ago. As we come around, there's a big learning stair right there in that main corridor. And then you come around the corner and walk down that hallway, and there's art room and maker's lab, and then the third and fourth grade classrooms. Upstairs, and well, there's also the gymnasium off to the side there. And the gymnasium is connected to the building, but also has the ability to be used after hours to where everybody doesn't have to come in the building to use it. It has its own entrance on the side. And there's some parking to that side of the building as well to use that for after hour use and on weekend use. Next slide. Yes, go ahead.
I understood that there would be pre-K or early childhood in this building. Is that still the situation?
No, that was never part of the program on this one. They have done that in some other buildings, but they've actually moved to more of using Broadmoor at 83rd and off of Metcalf there. I can remember, it's Lamar, I believe, as the early childhood center. So they're using that building more as early childhood instead
I
of
guess
doing
I
it
should
in the
clarify
buildings.
the pre-K similar to what was at Horizons and other elementary schools that they have,
No.
not early childhood.
No, that was never discussed at this building from administration to us anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. So this is the upper level floor plan that houses the older kids, the 5th and 6th graders, which is really kind of nice because they start to kind of really separate from the other kids. Kind of gives them their own identity in their own place to have the space. And it has an extra space up there, and also special education is currently identified to be up here, but it could be down on the first floor as well. They're all the same basic classrooms. There's some meeting spaces. And one of the big drivers of this design, which I don't have a slide of specifically, is the classroom design itself. It's pretty remarkable in a lot of ways. It has a lot of flexibility between classrooms. The teachers can work as teams. They can have the privacy if they want to not be connected, but if they want to be connected, they can. There's a shared space between each classroom that we call a co-lab space. It's like a wet, dirty kind of a lab. So each classroom has the ability to have like a little maker space right there in their classrooms between them. And in addition to those spaces, every classroom has 2 toilets right there in the classroom with them. So 2 classrooms share 2 toilets. That cuts down a lot of time where kids are outside the classroom going to the bathroom, especially when they're coming back from specials or plate. They can just come back to the classroom and start instruction. And if kids need to go to the bathroom, they're right there in the room. They can go do that. It's a big safety feature as well. But the real benefit of it is it allows us to open up the front of the classroom to the corridor. And the corridor, you'll notice, is very wide in this building. That's because we really want to activate that space in the corridor for teaching and collaboration and co-teaching across the hallway as well, just not next door to you, but across the way. So the fronts of these classrooms will have garage doors on them. So the teacher will be able to open up that garage door, and the kids will be able to just spill out of their room out into that space out in front, which we call the collaboration corridor. That space, the reason we can do that for safety is because the co-lab space between the classrooms is designed to house all the kids and all the teachers from 2 classrooms into that space. And in a lockdown situation, they can go into that space and they can pull those barn doors shut and lock them from the inside. They're out of sight, nobody sees them, and they have a secure place to be during a lockdown situation. All school districts do a lockdown situation, but usually it's in a corner of a classroom, kind of hidden in a corner. And they might have to sit there for 2 hours while there's something going on across the street or some other safe incident. This way they're locked in a space that's a little bit bigger, out of sight, out of mind, but they have access to toilets and water, which they've never had before. So it's a really kind of a different approach to that philosophy. And it's just great daily for teaching. It really gives a lot of flexibility for everybody. Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The building is 100% ADA accessible. And that was the issue at East, was that building was not 100% ADA. So that addition addressed that issue to make it ADA accessible. So yeah, it is. And that's why I said it's really up to the administration of the building where they put that program. We're showing it upstairs right now. It kind of fits up there. They really like it with the inclusion aspect of it up there, but it might fit, if the grade level of the kids in that program skew younger, they might want to be down where the younger kids are. And they have a lot of flexibility in extra classrooms that they could actually have 2 of them, 1 up, 1 down. Oh yeah. Yep. Yes, they are. Sure. Yep. And playground equipment now too. Yep. Staff parking is that parking on the, just pulling it up now. So that is the staff parking in the middle of that parent drop off and pickup lane. And there is a little bit additional on the right-hand side, correct? And then the visitors would be that on the street parking and ADA parking right there at the front door. We also are, there'll be parking spots as identified as charging stations. There will be 8 of them that'll be prepped for charging. They won't actually be charging day one. Right now, they're working on how they actually implement that as a policy and make that happen as a school district. Who's paying for electricity? How does that get done? But we are prepping them for 8 charging stations, and we're not exactly sure which spaces would those would be at. Bicycle stands are in the front. At the front of the building. We'll really start to flush that out in the DD level. The principal might say, I'd rather not have them at the front of the building. So they might be on that side entrance on the east side. There's a couple of spots to do it. And as part of the lead process, that's one of the big things they look at is wide sidewalks, bicycle, walkability, and how many bike storage we have. It's a pretty big number. I can't remember off the top of my head how many we provided at Deemer, but it's a lot. You bet. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, presenters. This is really exciting. Appreciate it.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I had one question. I'm sorry to come in late, but I just had a question in listening to you describe the lead certification process. And I think if I heard correctly, and I may not have, that you're not designing to a specific standard. It's just going to be, but you expect to score out
Well,
at some level.
Yes.
Help me
It's-
understand that process a little
So
bit more
we have
specifically,
We
please.
have an accessibility coordinator that is working with us to help us understand where we sit in our design process. And we meet with them every 2 weeks, I think, every 2 weeks of a meeting. Where this is where we're at on this day. How we're making targets. Do we need to make the right choices? And if she can do her internal scoring for us to help us and say, I think we're pretty close to being silver, right? We're comfortably certified. And we might be on that tipping point where we go into silver. And that's kind of the conversation we have. And when we're start talking about big budget issues that we're facing, pushing into deep silver or pushing deep into try to get to gold is something that could be, sometimes, but sometimes it just happens just because of the site issues or, there's a lot of components in the lead, like visibility, glare, views to nature that some buildings might not have, other buildings will. So they're all a little different. But we're definitely gonna make sure we're comfortably certified and pushing into the silver territory. Yep.
Thanks. The original budget for the building was $25 million. You've talked about millions of dollars in changes. What is it ballooned to now?
We're currently $5 million over budget.
So about 30. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else have any questions for our speakers? All right, thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you.
Next, we have the special use permit as well as the preliminary and final plats for Bickford at Mission Springs. Mr. Scott, will you please provide your report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Bickford at Mission Springs is an assisted living and memory care facility located at 5350 West 61st Place. The property is currently zoned CPO or planned office building. Nursing homes are permitted use in any zoning district with a special use permit. And when this project was approved back in 1995, a special use permit was issued for 25 years. That has expired. And we discovered that when they reached out to us a couple months ago. They're in the process right now of changing ownership. And they were just making sure that all of their ducks were in line with the zoning and everything. And they said, well, we need a special use permit, and we have a copy of the one from last time, and sure enough, it was expired. So the planning commission heard consideration of a special use permit at their meeting on March 28th, as well as a preliminary and final plat. The property was not platted, so we wanted to clean that up as well while we were going through this process with them. The planning commission did approve the special use permit with the following conditions. May be occupied or used for the above described special use or uses subject to these conditions and requirements. The special use permit shall be in place until such time as the use of the facility changes. The special use permit shall become void if the facility is vacant for 6 months or more. The facility shall remain compliant with all local, state, and federal laws and regulations, including proper licensing to operate as an assisted living facility. The applicant shall provide the city of Mission with any inspection reports from the state of Kansas and shall provide documentation of all license renewals, fire ingress and egress access from the west at 61st Place and from the northeast at the drive. Access to Rock Creek Lane shall remain and be maintained in adequate condition that fire apparatus has sufficient clearance for entry onto and throughout the property. Fire department access via the northeast fire access drive gate shall be granted at all times. All screening and buffers to surrounding properties, including all landscaping elements, are maintained by the property owner or owner's agent. And then finally, a final plat will be approved at the Planning Commission and the City Council and recorded with Johnson County Register of Deeds within 3 months of receiving the special use permit. So that was approved, as well as the preliminary and final plat. And both of these will be on your agenda for the April 20th meeting for your consideration. Our planner, Carrie Candeller, will be presenting this to you. So you can prepare yourself with challenging questions and throw a few curveballs and have a little fun with her. Yes. I don't anticipate a name change. They haven't said. So.
Any other questions for Brian?
Yeah. Brian, this is Ben. Are we paying attention to maintaining that right of way for that street that's not been actually installed on the new plat?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that
Yeah.
final plat does show that right of way. That right of way actually shows up in Ames, which is the mapping system with the county, but we don't have any record of it being dedicated. So I think at one point a survey was done that indicated that right of way. And the survey was given to the county, was recorded with Ames. It was just never recorded with the Register of Deeds. So this is kind of a process sort of catching that and getting that cleared up. So
Okay, so they're still looking at that. You're not sure whether that's going to be an easement or a dedication?
it'll be a dedication of right of way. Yes.
Okay, great. Glad to hear it.
Anything else for Brian? All right, thank you, Brian. The final presentation is the Mohawk Park site improvements discussion. Ms. Smith, can you please share information on this item?
Told the mayor I'd have it done at 6:29, but it's actually 4 or 5 something. Anyway. Also during their March 28th meeting, the Planning Commission considered the improvements to Mohawk Park. Everybody's familiar with Mohawk Park. It's located at the corner of 67th and Lamar. We've owned the site since 2003, at which time we acquired it from the Shawnee Mission School District. So I'm going to touch on a couple of the points from the Planning Commission meeting, and then I think as indicated in the packet, the Planning Commission actually added a recommendation, which is inconsistent with the direction that we've been working on for the last several years. And so I want to take some time this evening to kind of walk through that very specifically. I think most of you are familiar with that. But again, I think, as you know, we've been working on conceptual park planning for the last several years. Mohawk is the first park to move from plan to implementation. It has been a #1 priority, particularly to install restrooms in that park facility of the PRT since adoption of the park master plan. And this was a big push for us as we moved into this and headed into renewal of the street sales tax. Some things we'll cover a little bit later in the presentation. During the Planning Commission meeting on the 28th, and we don't have the minutes available yet, but they will be available prior to your council meeting on April 20th. So I think we'll have those in hand next week, and we'll make those available as soon as we can. The plans for the site improvements were presented. There were approximately half a dozen residents, both Mission and Overland Park residents. As you know, the south side of 67th Street there is actually in the city of Overland Park, and provided testimony, some around the parking and the location of the parking lot. Others who talked about a desire for universal design when the playground equipment is installed, and then also better access from 67th and Lamar. So following that public discussion, presentation by Shaughnessy Fickle Scott Architects, the commission then discussed and recommended approval of the plan with the following conditions. The first being that consideration be given to developing a new parking lot on the west side of the park off of Lamar instead of on the south side of the park as proposed, and that crosswalks be installed at 67th Street. Because this was a really dramatic shift in the conceptual park planning that we've done to date and the recommendation, and I think I wasn't present at the Planning Commission meeting, but I think there was it's kind of some confusion back and forth about what kinds of amendments. And as we move into looking at the minutes, it'll be much clearer kind of what some of their concerns are, and I'll touch on those here in just a moment. But we took the opportunity last week following that meeting to just sit down internally and debrief. And in fairness to the Planning Commission, we missed the mark as a staff, both on our staff side and the consultant side, of presenting the big picture to the Planning Commission. And I think had they had the benefit of that full presentation, the outcome and their recommendation might have been different. So we want to walk you through that and then talk about what our options are kind of at this point. So first, next slide, please. So just a reminder. Conceptual park planning in general, this is something that we started back in 2019. And we stated several objectives. So we had this master plan that was done, authorized in 2014. The bulk of the work was done through public input processes in 2015, ultimately adopted in 2016. But the recommendations were at a very high level, and there were, I think 29 or so high priority or number one priority recommendations. So beginning to sort through those, the conceptual park planning process allows us to bring those ideas down to each individual park level. And so one of the goals was to align that master plan, which now obviously is several years old, with updated stakeholder and citizen feedback. So are what people want to see in the parks the same? Are what we want to see as a council and a staff the same? It also, when you have those conceptual park plans, it allows you to go out and pursue grant opportunities and grant funding opportunities. You can show the grantors your big picture. It often is an excellent tool and puts us in line. And again, we know we've secured grant funding for this particular park as a result of that. It allows for flexibility and phased implementation. So one of the things that we knew was that with expiration of the Parks and Recreation sales tax in March of 2023, when that sales tax was adopted back in 2013, the lion's share, 60% of the revenues, was dedicated to debt service on the upgrade for the outdoor aquatic facility. And then, so that was number one priority. Number two priority was deferred maintenance here at the community center, and then park improvements to kind of fall in line with the goal of, once we got paid off the debt, got caught up in this facility, and potentially went for renewal of the sales tax, that we would then be able to really have an emphasis and a focus on our outdoor park improvements. But we knew that in those big picture plans, depending on what happens with renewal of the sales tax, we may or may not be able, we need to have some flexibility in how we phase that. And we've had some preliminary conversations as a council about, what is our philosophy with park improvements? Do we want to, tackle them one park at a time and kind of go from start to finish in terms of implementing everything perceived in a conceptual plan? Still yet to be determined, and I think will be a large part of our conversations leading up to, and then hopefully following approval and renewal of the sales tax. And then really, it's a preparation for renewal of that Parks and Recreation sales tax, to be able to have the conceptual plans, to be able to share with the public. I think it helps tell the story of the importance of the Parks and Recreation sales tax renewal. So next slide, please. As I mentioned, Mohawk was the first in this process, again, because it was the number one priority for improvements for the PRT. So how did we approach this process? We engaged Confluence to review the master plan, create renderings for each park. We created a stakeholder committee. We solicited feedback on park needs, concepts, et cetera. And the stakeholder committees were generally comprised of residents in the neighborhoods surrounding whichever park we were discussing, council representation, we had PRT representation, and then if there were specific user groups. So in the case of Mohawk, Northeast United Soccer has been one of the largest users of the park for 20 plus years, was part of that discussion. Then we looked through, again, feedback from the PRT, feedback through not only the stakeholder committees, but then public meeting feedback, review, adjust, come back, test the theories, and ultimately sort of moving towards council review and approval. So obviously starting this process in 2019, bless you, we got slowed pretty quickly in early 2020. I think we had our first public meeting in February of 2020, and then the world shut down and we had to sort of reevaluate what we were doing. So it definitely slowed the process. And then our plans have been to do this conceptual park planning for Mohawk, Broadmoor, Waterworks, Anderson, and Streamway. So the larger parks, not necessarily the pocket parks. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. So one of the other things that was really driving, in addition to the information included in the master plan, was looking at the information that we collected then as we're moving particularly into implementation and thinking about the renewal of the Parks and Recreation sales tax was information from the Direction Finder survey that was conducted in 2021. So high satisfaction generally from our residents with Parks and Recreation, generally high satisfaction with maintenance of the city parks and green spaces. But then if we go kind of to the bottom of this chart, the condition of when we get to condition of the existing park amenities, our numbers start to drop off a little bit. Not a surprise. It's not an area that we've made significant investments in over the years. Next slide, please. And then also looking at, we asked a question in that Direction Finder survey process about the Parks and Recreation services that should receive the most emphasis over the next 2 years. And you can see that condition of park amenities rises really to the top of that, along with maintenance of our parks. So this is a pretty strong message from our residents that aligns with what we've heard from the council and the staff, that investment in outdoor park improvements and maintenance of those things that we have is an important priority. Next slide, please. Then we also asked the question about the amenities that people would most like to see included in Mission's outdoor parks. Permanent restroom facilities ranked at the top. So again, that's consistent with the support and the planning that we've done for the addition, and a restroom in Mohawk Park being one of the first amenities to be rolled out. Next slide, please. So what's there today? So this is an aerial view. I think everybody's familiar with the park. As I mentioned, the city purchased the site from the Shawnee Mission School District in 2003 and demolished the Mohawk Elementary School that was located there. The only improvements that we've really made since acquiring the site in 2003 is we've done one resurfacing of the trail. So we've invested about $75,000 in that park in really about the last 20 years. As I mentioned, Northeast United Soccer, particularly soccer programs for their younger players, has used the park for years during the spring and fall soccer seasons. So the neighborhood is intimately familiar with the activities that are occurring in that park and sort of the expansion and contraction of traffic and users that occurs again during spring and fall soccer seasons. The other amenities that are there, if it's fair to call them that, the playground structure, the fence along the south side of the park, the backstop, et cetera, remain from when the site was Mohawk Elementary School. Those are not things that we have put on site since we've owned it. Next slide, please. So as we moved through the conceptual park planning process, one of the things that Confluence has done is develop a variety of different options based on stakeholder input and information coming out of the park master plan. So in the first public meeting that we had around Mohawk Park, there were two options for design of the park that were presented, and those are shown here. And really kind of just summarizing from a more general view, what did residents and stakeholders want? We've mentioned the restroom facility, a shelter. It says build a new shelter, but there's no shelter that really exists there now. So building a shelter, upgrading the playground amenities, including consideration for universal design elements, allowing the space for soccer programming for younger children, but not a commitment to maintain turf for any specific sport. One of the big themes through this process was maintaining the flexibility of the green space in the park. Expanding the walking trail to the entire perimeter of the park. That was an important consideration by the stakeholders and the residents. Incorporating more native plantings and trees, and pulling activity away from the houses that actually back up to Mohawk Park on the north. So you can kind of see in these two design options, option one and option two, in both options, really right out of the gate, the parking lot was relocated, and that just a different place on that south side. But coming out of kind of those initial meetings, the preference was 46% of those who had a preference preferred option one. So next slide, please. So we continued over time. I think there were, between the stakeholder group and public meetings and presentations to council committees and presentations to the PRT, we had over 20 meetings to discuss the concept and the design of Mohawk Park. Final concept, which is shown on this slide, and you'll see it does look slightly different from option one in a number of ways, was kind of the concept that we landed on. We used this concept to secure almost $400,000 in land and water conservation grant funds. This is the concept that was reviewed by the council on several occasions, and the concept on which the design contract that you awarded in November of 2021 was based on. The exception there is we are continuing to evaluate, the parking along Horton. As we went through the budget process for 2022, the council, and looking at the budget, order of magnitude costs, and potential phasing for this project, actually allocated additional money to the Mohawk Park project to get us through completion of phase 1B. So phase 1A, you may recall, was just to complete the connections to the existing trail and to add the restroom facility. The council increased the budget by almost $750,000 to allow us to pursue the construction of the shelter and the full pad for the shelter and the restroom as a part of this first phase. And then part of that goal was really looking to have a large scale improvement that was underway when we went out and pursued sales tax renewal. And then again, the opportunities for additional grant funding, which we're exploring and we'll be bringing back actually in conversation next month for the council. Next slide, please. These are just some perspective drawings that were provided in Confluence's presentations throughout this process. And I think it just kind of helps illustrate. So you'll see this would anticipate the photo on the left is the relocated parking to the south. You'll see how it relates to that central plaza area with the restrooms and the shelter. You'll see that there's actually that the parking is not right up against the street. There's quite a bit of buffer, both with landscaping and distance to the residents across 67th Street. And then the photo on the right is just another view looking to the east of that plaza area with the shelter and the restrooms. And kind of those tiered steps. And I think you'll recall we've talked a little bit about the potential for music concerts or movies in the park or things like that. And this slide will become a little bit more relevant as we move through this conversation. But next slide, please. So why relocate the parking lot? And I think this is the list that, as I shared with the traffic engineer late last week, I think if this had been incorporated more fully in the presentation to the Planning Commission, again, I think the discussion may have been different. But the current parking on that west side bisects the usable open space and open turf. And so it limits programming layouts that we might have. Moving the parking lot to the north on the west side pushes it against the residents to the north and doesn't allow really for an opportunity for a significant buffer. So you would have parking right up against the back fence and backyard of homes. Moving the parking lot south on that west side pushes it against the best visual corner of the park. So if you're driving north on Lamar, you come up on that. If the parking lot is in that southwest corner, you see the parking lot and you don't see the benefit of what other things the park may have to offer. And that either then creates a really long winding path to all those other centralized amenities. And it moves the parking entrance potentially closer to the 67th and Lamar intersection, which is something that the traffic engineers would likely advise against. Again, one of the other things that was key in the public input process was that the residents on all sides of the park wanted the amenities as pulled into the center as possible, to just keep that activity on the perimeter very limited really to that walking trail. the parking lot, moving the parking lot to the south side and the southeast side helps provide easier access to the shelter, which if you're having an event and have ever drug a cooler or birthday party supplies, you appreciate the close proximity to where you're able to park your car. I think, yes, Mayor.
Yeah, it also came up in our stakeholder meetings that having it close to the playground, similar situation. If you had children and strollers and stuff that you were trying to get to the amenities, that was important to users.
Yes. The southern parking allows the pavilion to overlook turf on the west side instead of paved parking. For movies in the park or music performances, again, think about those steps. Centralizes all of the active amenities in the park. And the proposed south parking alignment puts that single access drive in line with Beverly Street, which is preferred over something mid-block that could potentially impact driveways of residents across the street, and would be what would be recommended by a traffic engineer for alignment of that drive. Next slide, please. So just a quick recap of the project budget. For those who may not be familiar with it, overall, the project is estimated to be about $3.5 million. That includes everything, design, construction. So both hard and soft costs for that park. But as you can see and understand, $3.5 million project requires a phased implementation approach at this time. Again, in order to make a statement in connection with renewal of the sales tax, the council has been very specific in adding funds to get us through completion of the restroom and the shelter pavilion. When we brought the final, so as we've moved through this process and refined the design and really started to refine order of magnitude costs, when we brought the design contract to council in November of 2021, staff requested that the architects be allowed to incorporate relocation of that parking lot as part of the first phase, if the budget allowed, to really improve the aesthetics and functionality of the new pavilion and restroom. So if you think about, if we aren't able to move that parking lot and we put the pad in and we've got those lovely steps, you would be sitting on those steps looking at the cars parked in the parking lot where they are now. And we feel like as we move closer to bidding, that it may absolutely be possible to relocate that parking lot as part of phase 1B within the existing budget. So relocation of the parking lot, I think, has always been a question of when in relationship to implementation of this project, and not if, in kind of the overall planning and budgeting that we've done for Mohawk. The balance of improvements and where everything else comes in can't realistically be considered until we get a decision on the Parks and Recreation sales tax, which, as you know, we've placed on a mail ballot election for September. Next slide, please. So again, just a couple of things. This is, I believe, a rendering that you saw, may have seen with the design as we talked about phasing. So what's outlined in the dotted red line here is what would be constructed as a part of phase 1B. And again, with that would be the base bid that would be going out, and then with a bid alternate to relocate the parking lot if funds were available to do that. Again, phasing just allows us to continue to pursue other grant opportunities. And some of the things expressed by, I think, the residents and, as I understand it, planning commissioners in terms of playground design, universal design, those are all things we've talked about. Those are all things that will be incorporated. It's just that the playground was not part of phase 1. And I don't think it was clear that this was intended to be a phased project when it was presented to the Planning Commission. So next slide, please. So Planning Commission review and follow-up, and I know this is the worst thing you can ever do on a PowerPoint slide because it's a lot of words and very small. But so as I mentioned, we don't feel like the Planning Commission had the complete information, and we own that as a staff. They expressed concern about safety. In particular, I think a lot of their recommendations were driven by concerns about safety for pedestrians and particularly young cyclists with a trail crossing a parking lot entrance, because there's no conflict currently with parking lot entrances or driveways and the trail.
Laura, could you just clarify exactly what information did they not have?
They didn't see, let's go back to the overall concept. They didn't have any of this information. They didn't ever see this picture of the full build out of the park.
Because,
What?
because,
Because we dropped the ball as a staff.
but did we have access to it at the time? Did the staff have access to this, the pictorial the way it is?
Yeah, and again, I wasn't there. I don't know. I don't know what all happened and what all contributed to that,
Sure.
but this was not shared with them. The
Okay.
consultants should have had access to it. And we should have been able to pull this up and share that, but they didn't see this and they didn't have the information on the overall budget and the plan and where this fits in our process, and that this was intended to be what they were seeing. I think their understanding was that what they were seeing, and I know that Director Almany did try to explain that this was, part of a larger project and that this had been through a conceptual park planning process, but it all sort of, as I understand it, occurred in the kind of last closing minutes of the meeting. So it wasn't part of the presentation leading up to that. So.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of questions, but if we're not there yet, then I don't.
Yeah, I have just a couple more slides and then we'll be.
Okay.
Okay, so again, the Planning Commission's primary concerns seem to be about safety for pedestrians and young cyclists. And so that was the trigger for me in the debrief to say, well, did they not have that same concern when they saw the overall conceptual plan? Because ultimately, if you left the parking lot on the west side, you would have that same conflict, because the trail, although it does not do that today, is ultimately designed to go around the entire perimeter of the park. So following that, we've taken the opportunity last week to review the project Planning Commission concerns with the city's traffic engineers. They don't have their full report yet, which will be available prior to the April 20th City Council meeting. But I got a draft report late this afternoon that offers some of the following. So they did a comparison of Lamar and 67th Street. And while the streets are different in terms of character, both are sufficient to support the traffic that's generated by this park. We aren't changing the use of the park significantly. And again, that ebb and flow, that contraction and expansion is something that's occurred for a very long time. Again, if moving the parking lot to the south is preferred, then they would have recommended that alignment with Beverly. So that would be consistent with a recommendation that they would support when they look at and consider the full build out of the park concept. Any parking lot on the west side, again, as I mentioned, would also have an interaction with the trail. And so while they understand appreciate the concerns of the Planning Commission in terms of the potential for the interactions between pedestrians and cyclists and vehicles, those aren't uncommon in a park situation and not uncommon in park design. And they, as traffic engineers, feel they can be safely managed through the use of signage, pavement markings, detectable warnings, and other mechanisms, regardless of where that interaction would occur. GBA, the traffic engineers, have also suggested additional opportunities to improve general pedestrian walkability of the area, and that includes addition of a pedestrian crossing on the east side of the 67th and Beverly intersection, potentially adding a pedestrian crossing just west of the 67th and Horton, and then boxing in the Lamar and 67th intersection with 4 marked crosswalks and exploring additional curb ramps and detectable warning improvements. So that was the second piece of the Planning Commission's recommendation. So the traffic engineers report is going to fully support and recommend that piece of it. So next slide, please. So things to consider. What we don't know at this point is if we don't build to the conceptual plan as it was presented to the Land and Water Conservation Fund, we could jeopardize the almost $400,000 in grant funding that we've been able to secure so far. We haven't asked that question. We weren't anticipating this, but that's certainly something that could occur. As we think about options, if we were to leave the Planning Commission's recommendation in place, if the parking lot moves to another location anywhere in the park, we're going to have to reshuffle all the other existing park amenities, and resulting in redesign and the loss of, the design contract for just this phase one was over $100,000. If we were to remand it back to the Planning Commission for a reconsideration, we can expect a delay in implementation by probably 45 to 60 days. The plan originally was to have this approved by the Planning Commission, approved by the council on April 20th, and that we would immediately move to bidding the project with contract award at May meeting and a July groundbreaking for this project. Remanding it back to the Planning Commission doesn't provide any assurance that they will come back with a different recommendation. And then regardless of the decision of the council on April 20th, we understand, and this would have been part of our process, we just should have done it probably 2 months ago, that the Planning Commission will receive a full presentation on the park planning process, the conceptual park plans. So next slide, please. So we're certainly in less than an ideal situation. And I think, part of it as well, and we've talked internally about, this has moved quickly in the planning and design process. And we've learned a lot of lessons as a result of this. And we're looking at some reevaluation of our planning and development timelines to make sure that we get all of these bases covered through the process. So I think most of you, if not all of you, are familiar that what happens when you have a Planning Commission recommendation that comes forward to you. The council by code has 3 different options. So you can approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission. That takes a simple majority vote. You can override the Planning Commission recommendations, but in order to override Planning Commission recommendations, that takes a 2/3 majority vote of the City Council, or 6 votes. That's, in most cases, I would say that's not the ideal method or approach. And this, I'll come back. I think this may be a little bit of a unique situation, which is why we wanted to just have this conversation tonight. And then the third option is to return or remand the recommendations to the Planning Commission with very specific instructions about what you want them to reevaluate or review. So in this case, would be we would be providing them with the addition of, the larger concept and the traffic engineer's report. And so those are really kind of the options. Wanted to try to answer some more questions, and then we can kind of circle back about, what this looks like or could look like when it comes forward on the 20th. And I think the next slide is the last one, which is just discussion. So.
All right, questions for Laura? Hillary?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. When can we get the Planning Commission meeting minutes? When do you expect those? Before the 20th?
Yeah, we should have them next week.
Okay. Is there any reason we can't videotape those meetings?
We haven't. I mean,
Just to really truly understand the context. Sometimes reading the minutes is challenging to understand. And I apologize that this happened for you. I know that this is not fun to have to deal with. And I to staff's defense, I think this is, I don't think this is an isolated incident, as it's come from the parks planning process in confusion. And again, I can't speak to what happened at the Planning Commission meeting, but I think it's more reflective generally of kind of the process, and it just taking a really long time and everyone not really feeling like they're having a lot of clarity on the process. So maybe that's something that the Planning Commission was feeling, or maybe staff was feeling. So just a little defense there, but yeah. So other questions would be, can we expect these residents to come on April 20th? And were they at any of the other stakeholder meetings? And one final question, were any of the Planning Commission members part of those stakeholder groups, or was that not appropriate?
Did you have planning commission members on your, I don't think we had, I don't think we included planning commission members. Although was Robin Duclos on your stakeholder committee? No, we did not specifically add planning commission members to those stakeholder groups. And one of the things that we've talked about internally, and Carrie, our new planner, had some questions about just the process. And I said, unfortunately for us as a city, we've not done a lot of the Planning Commission has not touched a park project. The last time they touched a major park project was in 2013, 2014 for rebuild of the aquatic center.
And honestly, I was kind of surprised that it even went to the Planning Commission. I mean, I guess it makes sense, but considering it's a, city-owned site and.
Well, it is, and we still have to, we still have that, but I think there is some education that needs to occur, because I do think that sometimes when it is a public project, the Planning Commission can feel sometimes more comfortable in moving pieces and parts around than they might with a private development. Although, Brian will tell you that, we have a Planning Commission that's very actively engaged in that process. We also have a lot of new members of the Planning Commission. As you'll recall, we've had a lot of turnover on all of our boards and commissions, which is good.
So my other question was, those other residents, can we expect them on April 20th? How they catch wind of the Planning Commission meeting, et cetera?
I'm sure they were notified by the Planning Commission meeting. They lived within 200 feet. I'd have to look. I haven't seen, without seeing the minutes, we'll have to look and see who they were. I think the mayor may be able to speak. She was on the stakeholder committee. We have had residents who have attended and talked about this is not a new issue of these residents. So they've talked about the parking, and I think that's consistent. Same thing when we redid the pool. Anytime we talk about changing traffic or cars or parking, that's generally where people are going to get sort of most, and I don't know where these folks lived. I think there was a mix. We did have some people, residents of Overland Park, that did reach out to their own city early in this process. We communicated with the city of Overland Park and have kind of kept them apprised, and they haven't stepped forward on behalf of those residents to necessarily express concerns. So I think, yes, I think you could have these folks. Again, until I see the names, I don't know if it's consistent with who's attended a variety of meetings over the course of the last 2 years.
Yeah, that's just what I was going to say, is I don't know the specific people, but we did have through the public meetings, not necessarily the stakeholder group. We did have people from Overland Park and from Mission just express general traffic. And, if you make this a destination park, will there be more people? Just, questions along those lines. Some discussion of 67th and Lamar, and which was busier. I mean, they're both busy streets. They both have speeding issues. If you look at 67th, there are now some traffic calming measures that Overland Park has more recently installed that would be sort of in the lead up to the park, I think, to help control traffic and speeds. So there were comments about both of that, as well as, the parking on the north side. There's currently the circle lot, and then there's discussion of the on-street parking. So just, there were those traffic issues raised, but I would say sort of, depending on where you lived, kind of aligned with where you were concerned about the traffic and the cars being.
And to my knowledge, at least in my tenure here, we haven't had complaints about traffic and parking specifically in connection with activities in that park. That's not to say they haven't felt those things, but it hasn't risen to the level of someone being willing to, call, write a letter, send an email, et cetera.
Let's let Ben go online. He's been waiting for a while.
Thanks. Didn't want to jump in and cut anybody off. I had the pleasure of sitting on the PRT when a lot of this was going on and working on the steering committee for at least part of the process. And Laura's done a great job summarizing pretty much everything that I feel about this particular topic. I really do see, and I'm eager to see the minutes also, but I see that the Planning Commission may not have had all of the background information I would have hoped they would have gotten. But one thing I want to add is just it's a Western parking lot and access is not something that we haven't already considered. Those were drawn up in concept drawings at least once. And like Solly said, we've discussed this with residents, specifically the 67th Street parking access before. You know, the PRT, the steering committee, SFS, you know, we've all considered this question quite a lot. And I think it's very clear that the southern alignment is the safest. It's the best for the layout, and the disruption really is not going to be significant. I just feel very strongly that, again, I don't want to be make a routine of suggesting that we override the Planning Commission, but I think the work has been done here. I think the consideration has been put in. I don't want to jeopardize the funding, and I don't want to spend a bunch more time on this than we already have. So I would be in favor of moving forward and not reworking the plan to consider a different parking arrangement. Thanks, Trent.
Debbie, and then Mary.
I'm curious, has anybody put in a request for a name change with all the different things going on?
Yeah, in fact, we talked about that. And we had some more significant feedback in terms of keeping the name the same. I had that action item out on my desk today, actually looking back through that, and I had forgotten something, so I'll mention that now. So what the council agreed in concept, and we went and we reached out to the Mohawk tribe specifically. That was some direction that came out of that meeting. I don't know, Emily, how many times? Probably 4 or 5 times she's contacted them, and we've not had any response.
Okay.
But so in concept, the council agreed at that time to keep the Mohawk Park name, but that when this plaza was constructed, that the plaza be dedicated and named as Meadowlark Plaza, which was one of the names that was suggested through the park naming process. So that's kind of the track that we're on. But I had forgotten about Meadowlark Plaza till I went back and looked at. I'm sure Penn remembers, but I had forgotten that piece of it.
Okay, a couple more things quickly. I think we need to be extremely diligent in protecting our grant dollars, because what happens, people who apply for grants tend to look across the board. If someone has lost one, will that be an opportunity to fail another time when we need the money extremely a lot? So protection of grant monies, I think, is real important. Has anybody in the recommendations around the peripheral of the park had any recommendations about putting a light at 67th and Lamar versus the stop sign?
We haven't. I can ask the traffic engineers. I'm going to guess they're going to tell us the volumes wouldn't warrant a traffic signal.
Sure.
Or
Okay,
I
thank you.
think I remember just talking at one of the meetings and hearing that would not likely meet warrants or even close, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's an easy question. They've pulled some of the traffic count data, so I can certainly, as we get a final version of his report, I can ask that question as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Ben's statements. You know, I've been on PRT for as long as Ben was. A lot of eyes have seen this, and I know I've seen it, and PRT's seen it, and a lot of the other stakeholder committees as well. So I'm also in favor of making sure we protect grant dollars and protect this moving forward. So
Let me just add how hard and long Penn worked on this grant. Just massive kudos to the work that went into that, and the sweat and the nervousness and the waiting. Thanks, Penn.
Yes.
Ken, go ahead.
Going forward, what role and what timing should the Planning Commission have in this process for other parks going through the same process?
So I think the plan would be to basically take back this presentation, regardless of what decision you make going forward, making this presentation. And, you know, similar, I mean, we visited our various boards and commissions in advance of the renewal of the street sales tax, just so that they felt educated and informed. And we did FAQs. That's been on our radar and our plan, but we were waiting to be able to take it back with here's the recommendation, here's the rate, you know, and walk through all of that. And I think we just didn't think through making sure that they understood the conceptual piece. So when we go back with a presentation, which will now be before the sales tax, it would be generally this presentation, so they understand specific to Mohawk where this falls in the conceptual park planning process. But we would also share the conceptual drawings that have been done and the process so far on Broadmoor and Waterworks. But again, so that they've got that foundation in place and know that those other park plans are coming in addition to some other ones in the future.
So without alienating our members of the Planning Commission, is there any sense of the dissension that occurred? Was there any dissension that occurred within the Planning Commission on the discussion of this project, including members that live in Millhaven? Was there any discussion about that at the meeting?
From what Brian has recounted, and he can jump in here again, I wasn't there, but what we've talked about internally was really driven by a lot of these safety concerns. And again, what if you have a young child riding a bicycle on the trail and they're not used to running? And one of the other things I forgot to mention is they talked about, one of the other things the traffic engineer has said, so the fence that exists along the south side, if you look at the overall conceptual plan, ultimately that fence is coming out. And so what is there now that creates sort of that feeling of a more natural barrier is not going to exist. And that, again, that was not something that the Planning Commission understood. Think of, as we have talked about it internally, both Brian and Carrie said, you know, they feel like if the Planning Commission had had this presentation at their March 28th meeting, probably would have alleviated those concerns. So, you know, certainly I'm sensitive to anytime we do anything that's inconsistent with whether it's remanding something back or potentially considering an override. But I hope, you know, that regardless of the decision, you know, we will treat that with the utmost respect for the work, you know, for the work that they do and the time that they put in. And I think I don't feel necessarily comfortable. I mean, I'm hearing the feedback from you all. I don't want to make a staff recommendation tonight until I have the benefit of seeing the minutes. But I think I would be comfortable, if the council would like, to make a staff recommendation when your April 20th agenda comes out.
Yeah, I'd like to just add a couple comments from my own perspective. I think others have mentioned it a lot better than I could about just the public's seen it. It's been through the process, and there are some legit concerns about losing out on funding and keeping the time and pace in track. I think it's really imperative that we keep moving forward on that. And then I'm going to put my Pete Heaven hat on for a second. I mean, we also have in the code a remedy to be able to override the commission, I think, for exactly situations like this. This was just a human error situation. And I would just encourage everybody to understand that, although it might not be ideal, it's a perfectly legal and acceptable option that is available to us on this body to be able to continue to move the project forward. So I would just encourage us to remember that, despite any other concerns that may be at play there. And then lastly, if there's any lesson that I've kind of learned too, just being on this body, whether it's this project or the Stride Development Project up on 51st, is that, a lot of times the traffic engineers will address those concerns, but I've rarely seen them come back and say that, yeah, there's bona fide problems. I mean, I think we should all feel comfortable knowing that some of these comments or potential worries about traffic problems are being triaged and adjudicated on kind of the professional side. So I trust the experts on that, you know, they've looked at that and that they're comfortable moving forward as well.
And
So-
I do want to say, just in fairness, and I think I mentioned this, but the traffic engineers absolutely, you know, understand and appreciate the concerns about the safety and the pedestrian and vehicle interaction. But again, they said that's not something that we don't have tools in place to be able to deal with. I think Debbie.
Okay, yeah, Debbie.
And I apologize if I missed this. Do we have lighting in this park?
No lighting, right? Oh, we do have lighting.
do?
Sorry, there is lighting in the park.
I can't see it on any of the visuals. Is
It's
it?
not in these conceptual.
Uh-huh. Okay. Perfect. Great. Excellent. Thanks so much.
Trent coming.
Ken, yeah.
Is there any option for the planning commission to have a special meeting prior to the 20th?
We could absolutely call a special meeting. You know, what we may want to do is Brian and I can talk with the chair and kind of see, could take the temperature there and see what that looks like.
I think that it would be a courtesy thing for them to have that opportunity to at least fill in some of the information that was not available to them at the time, even if it's a Zoom-based meeting. But I think that that might be helpful prior to our council meeting on the 20th.
I agree with Ken. I think if they had the opportunity to see, you know, the traffic engineer's report and understand, you know, how this affects the overall project, and filling in some of the gaps in that information, it really would help them to understand why we're concerned. And give them the opportunity to rethink and revote and you know, review the situation.
Solly.
Yeah, I just had one comment on the design too that I did want to note and could perhaps be part of any staff discussion back with the planning commission whenever that happens, is that there is an internal loop on the trail as well. So if you had a small kiddo that you didn't want crossing the parking lot, you could have the option to keep them, you know, on that internal trail loop. And then I'm guessing this would be part of the consideration of staff in calling a special meeting or not would be, can the planning commission even revote if council hasn't taken action? I wouldn't think so,
Yeah,
but
you would, that's the challenge. What, if that's the route, I mean, if ultimately, as you think about this, and it's important for the planning commission to meet again, the more reasonable special meeting would be for the city council to have a special meeting following the planning commission's meeting. So you're going to have to take action at your legislative meeting on the 20th and make a decision. So you would have to formally at that point remand it back to the planning commission, or they can't formally revise their recommendation at a special meeting.
Well, remanding would be my first choice, because that would give them the opportunity to rethink it, given other information. We could always have a special meeting afterwards that we could take action on. I don't know to what degree we're delaying the process by doing so. If we were to do a fast track remand, give them the opportunity to review and then come back with a special council meeting to take action following their opportunity to review the information that they didn't have.
So
With all due respect, I
Yeah.
really appreciate the planning commission's time and efforts, volunteer, like all of our commissions are, but you know, we do have the remedy to go ahead and override it. We have talked about this. You know, forever. And it's a remedy we can use. And I think this is an appropriate time to go ahead and use it. And I think we should go ahead and override the commission. We've delayed. I don't think that we need to delay it any longer.
I agree. I just urge us not to overthink this. We have a way to move forward, and this project's already been through a lot of unprecedented circumstances with COVID. And I think we owe it to our residents to find the path forward in a way that's still consistent with what we've already received grant funding for and a timeline on. So that's my hope as well, that we can move forward with our legislative remedy.
I'm going to offer one thing, the risk of having tomatoes thrown at me. So just to answer the question, if we looked at a remand in a special meeting situation, you would delay potentially the bid. If the council, we're already having a work session on April 27th. You could call a special meeting ahead of that or in connection with that. That's 2 days after the next planning commission meeting. You would be delaying putting the bid out on the street by 1 week instead of 30 days or something like that. Again, I'm hearing a lot of we don't even want to wait that long, but I just want to, in being responsive to others who've said, what would that look like? There would be a path to do that doesn't create a significant delay in our bidding timeline.
But
Laura-
there's really no guarantee that they would go ahead and.
No, and at that meeting, then you could override, right? There's no guarantee at that, but then you don't have any longer period of time to wait.
To address Ken's concern, would it be possible for staff to offer some sort of educational, just brief presentation, letting the planning commission know right after our vote or right around it, why we're having to do this and the circumstances surrounding it, et cetera, so that they're getting the information right away and they don't go and just read about it somewhere?
Yeah. And we've
that would be
talked
an
a little bit
alternative.
about what the right timing of that is. We can certainly try to do that ahead of their next meeting and ahead of your April 20th meeting. Their meeting would be the 25th following. So at a minimum, we would be in front of them at their April 25th meeting with that presentation and explanation.
I'd just like to add that if we're considering a remand to the commission, essentially to tell them this is what we want to see, we may as well not do it at all and just let them know why we want it that way. That's my opinion. I don't fault them for making the best decision with the information they had at all. And I think the planning commission does fantastic work, but I don't see it as terribly productive to go through the extra step.
I'm going to be the devil's advocate because I think we have the planning commission for a reason. We didn't include them in the process in the right time, and they made the decision that they did. I think we have to honor the fact that they do have a role to play, and that if we're going to delay it by a week, that's not really that much of a delay, and we're respecting the work that they do. I think that otherwise we're ignoring the step that we should have taken to begin with, which was to include them in the process earlier.
So Laura, will it just be a matter of us voting on either remanding or overriding at the 20th?
Yep.
Okay.
6.
Other questions for Laura?
Could you just review the options that we've all pointed out before we?
So you can approve their recommendation as it is, which I haven't heard any support for.
The 3 that you have included in here? Is
Yeah.
that? Oh.
So you can approve it. You can remand it back to them. If you remand it back, you always remand back with specific instructions about what you want them to reconsider. And I think that's clear. We've had other instances where it's been a little more challenging to say exactly what you want them to reconsider. Or you can override them with a 2/3 majority vote.
Well,
So
how do the 3 fit in with the timing that's been addressed throughout the last 15 minutes?
So any of them, whether you remanded, if you remanded on the 20th, we would take it right back to them on
The
their April
25th.
25th meeting. Yeah. Again, there's not, the information is there. We're not out collecting a bunch of additional information. You aren't going to be requesting us to research or do anything else. So the remand would happen. If you took that action on the 20th, it would go to their meeting on the 25th.
And then the next step for them would be to do what?
They'd be done at that point. They would either stand by their original recommendation or revise their recommendation.
And at that time, if the council overrides, it's by majority, is it not?
I believe so. When it comes back after a remand, it's simple majority, not super majority.
That's what I understood.
Yes, I didn't put that in the presentation, but that is true. Okay.
Any other questions for Laura? Okay.
Do we need to, is this a discussion item only at this point in time, or?
Yeah.
We'll get the minutes out to you next week as soon as they're available. But then you will have this, will appear as a planning commission item on your April 20th agenda, similar to the Bickford. I don't think they'd take action on Rushton, correct? Yeah, so no action on Rushton. So Bickford and Mohawk Park will be on your city council agenda for the 20th.
Okay.
All right, we'll now move into our action items. Our first action item is the acceptance of the meeting minutes from Audrey Mcclanahan.
Thank you. These are the March 2nd Community Development Committee minutes for your review, please.
Sounds good. I think we can take that to consent. The next item is the purchase of bulk deicing salt from Central Salt LLC from Brent Morton.
Thank you. So as Trent said, bulk de-icing salt. We've had some rough winters, the last couple winters, purchasing about the same amount we did last year. Salt's essential to what we do, snow plowing activities, pre-treatment. It helps us peel it up, heavy snows, helps ice control, just all around drops the freezing temperature of snow and ice to where we can clean stuff up and, you know, get the streets as clean as possible, as quick as possible. So essential commodity for the public works activities. We went out to bid with Overland Park in 2020 to get a lot better rate on our bulk de-icing or salt. Saw significant cost savings going out to bid with Overland Park, Roland Park, Prairie Village, and there's a couple other cities on there. So the contract renews May 31st every year for 4 years. So I think next year, the year after, we'll be going out to bid again. But in that contract, it states with fuel costs, they have the option when they renew it to raise their costs, and then we have to accept that later on this year, which we'll bring back. So that's why we're trying to order it early so we can take advantage of the good price, because I'm sure everybody's aware fuel has gone skyrocketed. So I see a giant cost increase in the coming year on salt. So staff's recommending buying 1,200 tons of salt from Century Salt at a cost of $49.71 per ton. It's about $1 increase from last year. So I think we're still getting a real good price, and that is delivered to our facility, and we put it up from there. We've got a 65,000 available in the budget, and this is coming in right at 59,652. So that's what staff is recommending to purchase this year. Be happy to answer any questions.
Anything for Brent? Ken?
Recommend we take to council on consent.
Okay. I'm good
Thank
with
you.
that. Thanks, Brent. The last action item is a task order with GBA to perform on-call review services for miscellaneous site development program plans from Celia Durant.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We have 2 on-call engineers, GBA and Olson, and they provide a variety of services, including development review. So typically when like the park or another application comes in, either staff reviews it, or depending on the time available or the expertise, we will ask GBA to review. And so typically they would provide a scope of work and a cost, and development review has a quick turnaround time. So sometimes they can't even get to that till they've done that work and we've approved it. So what we're recommending is that you approve a task order agreement with GBA in an amount not to exceed $50,000. And then that's effectively like a retainer. So they would take the amount that for each task and take it off the $50,000. And that would just provide us with some flexibility and timeliness for that. And it's unlikely they're going to spend $50,000 this year, but it would provide us with flexibility. And there's just a lot of development going on right now. So that's our recommendation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Most of those costs are recovered through plan review fees. So only on a very small project would we not probably recover those costs ultimately.
Anything for Celia?
Recommend we take to council consent.
Okay. Thank you, Celia.
Thank you.
All right, we do have one discussion item this evening. We have an ordinance clarifying trail use and micromobility devices from Penn.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So annually, the Parks, Recreation and Tree Commission reviews Chapter 230 and 240 of the municipal code. And during 2021's review, there were some discussion items revolving around mobility devices, trail users, and then balancing the two within our own trail system, as well as some communication type elements. So one of the initial discussion items was how can we improve trail etiquette that revolved initially around signage, potential ordinance amendments, those types of things. A list of objectives was created in order to kind of focus all of the feedback and input from the Park, Recreation and Tree Commission. And so some of those objectives for both short and long-term considerations were, let's make sure the ordinance is communicating clearly exactly what we want. Let's make sure that it's welcoming our users, promoting accessibility, enhancing community for all ages, focus, helping the trails become a little bit more user-friendly, considering the safety of users, and then flexibility to the foreseeable trends. So those are some of the overarching ideas that kind of led to some of these ordinance amendments or proposed changes. Based off of all the feedback, a subcommittee was formed of Mark Radaziner, Ann O'Leary, and then pre-council member Ben Chosey. And so they spent significant amount of time taking the feedback from the Park Recreation Tree Commission, putting it into a cohesive plan, and then sharing with me some of those changes. And then we did our best to kind of create them in a format that was understandable. So first draft was created and shared in April 2021. Second draft was created based off of PRT feedback in May of 2021, at which point it was shared with our legal counsel, Payne and Jones. They came back with some feedback based upon those changes. We then reached out to Mid-American Regional Council, got their impression on trends for mobility devices, things like e-scooters, e-bikes. They recommended that we use micromobility as an actual language term and referencing accessibility for all at some point. Specific considerations focused around making sure that any kind of legal feedback that we got, make sure that those changes took a priority. And so we underscored that. Then we reached out to Chief Madden, who gave it a few glances and said that we should make sure that it coincides with the standard traffic ordinance, just for consistency's sake. So he pulled out a couple of things, proposed that we share that with the PRT. So we've done that. One of those elements that kind of stuck out was skateboarding in the business districts. And apparently years back, there was significant damage that happened from skateboarders, both on railings, steps. And so that was included in an ordinance change. And so essentially they were banned in the business districts. And, you know, obviously those types of things carry over into other ordinances. So that's worth considering. So just for simplicity, 230.080A removes walking. We define specifically what micromobility devices means to the city of Mission. And 230.090 essentially trails. It limits the speed of the devices and then allows the director of Parks and Recreation to denote certain trails as walking only. And as of right now, all of the trails in Mission are denoted as walking only, just as a default. 230.150, posting signage in parks. That stemmed just from some people's erroneous signs, neighbor signs, just landing in the parks. And then limit of sports surfaces to pedestrians and those with accessibility devices. So that stemmed from people riding their bikes on tennis courts specifically. Clarification on trail use that passes through commercial districts. We just wanted to make sure that 305.040 maintained its initial intent was to say, hey, this is separate from park trails. You can't do these things here. Refer back to the park trail ordinances for those types of things. So we had a few questions just from council members and mayor. One of them was what started the precedent? What feedback do we get from the subcommittee? So at some point, council member Chosey can weigh in, but generally speaking, the PRT wanted to make sure that Mission residents felt like parks were accessible, that it wasn't just for walkers only, and that people with children, people that rode bikes or wanted to use some other form of transportation could within our parks. And then right now there's kind of a limit to what's allowed. We reached out, compared ourselves or our wants with what other communities are doing. So JCPRD did a pilot program for e-bikes specifically, and that was driven by a special interest group who said, hey, this is benefiting older citizens. Pedal assisted bikes is a great trend, helps us get some exercise while not necessarily taking all of the effort of riding a manual bike. And so they did a 6-month pilot program, came back with great feedback. They had some vendors on the trails answering questions, didn't have too many incidences of walkers and bikers conflicting. So they've since adopted the e-bike allowance. And it's worth noting for future questions that there are 3 classes. One is a pedal assisted, less than 20 miles an hour, and that's class 1. There's a class 2, which is essentially a throttle on your bike. And then there's a class 3, less than 28 miles an hour, pedal assisted. So they have allowed class 1 and 3. They don't allow any kind of throttle. Let's see, Lenexa adopted e-bikes. There's a 20 mile an hour limit. Oh, I should go back. JCPRD doesn't have a speed limit. They just say, use it at your own discretion. Most of these bikes are limited to 20 anyway. And then they've put on some trail line markers to kind of help. Lenexa, they don't allow throttling. So class 2 is banned from them too. You can ride e-bikes in their parks, trails, streets, and sidewalks. And then e-scooters specifically are limited to 15 miles an hour, which was unique. And you cannot ride e-scooters in the parks, but you can everywhere else. They also have a 3rd category called motorized skateboards, hoverboards, unicycles, which are also not allowed in their park system. And they focus their messaging on trail use etiquette and just making a nice, clean, clear page for all of their citizens to go as a landing page for e-bike questions. And then Overland Park has adopted a micromobility stance that came because of bird scooters. And so they're in the process of evaluating how that fits within their community. Council's supposed to weigh in by November of 2023. So it's my understanding that that'll be in place at least for another year, and then probably some changes based off of feedback that they get. But their current language is the same. E-bikes, e-scooters, they treat them all the same as cyclists. So for simplicity, I think that helps, but they do have a 15 mile an hour maximum speed. And so one of the questions we got, why 15? Why 15 miles an hour? Well, these vehicles, for lack of a better term, are maxed out at 20 typically. More often than not, you can't go 20 on a stretch because there's winds and whatnot. And it seems like a reasonable speed to give people enough opportunity to make decisions based off of oncoming traffic or coming up to pedestrians. Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, most communities adopt a 15-mile-an-hour threshold. And then all languages based off of that cap at 20 miles an hour for class 1 and class 3. There was another question based off of the recommended changes in the ordinances if we're allowing animal strollers or wagons or children cars, or how do we address some of those specific type questions like we recently received from an Overland Park resident, right? And so right now they're not currently addressed. It's a short answer. We could easily remove one of the sections. It says vehicles for use with children. We could just remove the for use with children and just have it as devices, trail devices, and that would satisfy the animal strollers, the wagons. And I believe if we pay a little bit more attention, maybe adjust a few elements of language, we could probably incorporate something along the lines of children's vehicles that go pedestrian walking speed, 4 miles an hour or something like that. But I'm happy to take any additional questions you may have.
Hey, Penn. Since the last time I had a chance to review this, it looks like we added prohibitions for rollerblades and roller skates. Can you share the motivation there?
Yeah, that was specifically because of the standard traffic ordinance. So that was to align the STO with our current ordinance. Because right now those are separated. Micromobility and the STO has all of those, and then skateboards, rollerblades, roller skates are parsed out exactly how it is in this recommended version.
Okay. I'm not a big fan of adding that, but I don't want to bring us out of parity with the STO. So maybe we take a look at why that is prohibition is in there in the first place in a separate thread. But thanks for the info there.
You bet.
Ken?
The reason that I had asked about the 15 miles per hour is that runners can actually run up to 28 miles an hour if they're just running. That's minute bowl, of course. But I thought that maybe to be consistent, moving it to 20 miles an hour would allow individuals that are running could run up to 20 miles an hour and not be in violation of this trail speed limit.
Yeah.
What's your 40 time, Ken? What's your 40 time?
Now or 10 years ago?
Yeah.
I just want to point out, we thought a while about this speed. 15 miles an hour is the benchmark at which you start to really, the risk of injuring somebody in a collision starts to go up more than just a very small amount. And I do just want to point out, 10 miles an hour is a 6-minute mile. So you really got to be, sprinting down the trail at 20. And I don't know that we necessarily on all of our trails want that. That was the motivation behind 15 when we were going through the process. So.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, and referencing Councilmember Chosey's earlier remark, we tried to eliminate as many restrictive languages as possible just to make it inviting. So that was a concerted effort.
Yeah, the idea was just balance between all the needs of people moving at different speeds and doing different activities without making any one group too restricted or too unsafe. And I feel like we got to a pretty happy medium, I think.
Any other questions for Penn? Yes, Holly.
I had a question for Ben, actually. I was wondering if PRT considered at all treating the parks and the rest of the trail system differently. I'm just thinking of kids at the playground at Mohawk next to someone riding 15 miles an hour on a 4/10 of a mile, loop, and whether that really makes sense for the size of our parks, or if PRT discussed that.
Yeah,
piece.
absolutely. That's where the sort of the authority for the parks director to put up walking only signs comes into play. We didn't want to have to come back and rewrite, the ordinance every time we wanted to change something. We feel that there are trails where it may be appropriate, or there could be trails where it may be appropriate within the park to use a bicycle, and there may be trails where it's not. And so we felt that just moving that into an administrative function where the parks director can say, walking only on this trail is the most maintainable stance going forward.
Yeah, and where possible, we're trying to get all of our conceptual designs so that the trails are at least 10 feet in width. Yeah, because right now we struggle with that 4 to 6 foot range, and obviously you can't pass too many people with that space.
Anything else for Penn?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Penn. Laura, are there any department updates for the Community Development Committee?
No, but I would have a question. So do you want this to come back next month as an action item? Is there any additional information you want to see before we bring it back as an action item, since we did transition this to discussion this evening?
To Ben's question, could we just learn a little bit more about why no roller skates or roller blades? I didn't know I had an opinion on this until that comment.
Sure.
But I also agree that, that seems kind of silly not to.
Yeah,
have that.
absolutely. We can do that. That was the only one that I heard kind of any remaining maybe questions about.
I wondered on the director's authority too, if we could potentially explore giving the director the authority to allow for like regular bikes and like ADA type of devices, but potentially just eliminating the e-bikes or e-scooters on certain trails. Cause I think how it's worded now would only give a walking or everything else option. So maybe just that flexibility that Ben was talking about.
So more nuance in the director's discretion and authority. Okay.
Yeah, I think in general, we're looking for a framework and then to give the Parks Department the ability to make more specific decisions.
Leah?
So as a mom of small children at one time learning to ride a bicycle, I just want to make the point that there's a difference between an adult riding a bicycle on a trail and a child riding or learning to ride a bicycle on a trail. Because there's not a lot of sidewalks in Mission. So just wanted to bring that point forth.
Yes, was there a question in there?
Not really a question, but just when you're considering a trail that would maybe not have bikes allowed, there's many times that I would go walking with my child on their little bike with the training wheels.
Right.
And that's a different scenario than me now riding a bike
Right.
on my own on those same trails.
Right.
So just, wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, great feedback.
Yeah, I just want to say congratulations to the group that worked on this and thank you for all the work you did. I feel comfortable with it once you finalize the ordinance and want to bring it forward for action.
Thank you.
Thanks, Penn.
And I'm going to just hold all of my updates till F&A, if that's okay with you.
Sure. All right, well, it is now 8:27 PM, and with no further discussion, that concludes this meeting of the Community Development Committee. Again, this video will be made public on our website at missionks.org. Thank you very much. I'll now turn it over to Chairwoman Crane.
Does anybody need a water break or a restroom break or anything? Okay, how about 3 minutes? Be back? sorry. But in consideration of the ongoing COVID-19 health concerns, we are offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. The public is also invited to participate in the meeting. If you are participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are part of our in-person group tonight, please raise your hand, but stay seated and we will call on you to go to the lectern to make your comment. When you make your comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Also be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment now? Not seeing any, we'll move into public presentations when we don't have any this evening, so we'll move into our two action items. The first action item is the acceptance of the meeting minutes from Audrey Mcclanahan.
Thank you. These are the March 2nd, 2022 Finance and Administration Committee minutes for your consideration, please.
Everyone okay with
Recommend
moving
acceptance.
forward? Consent. The next action item, which is the last one, is the assignment of the Mission Bowl Development Agreement by Laura Smith.
Yes, thank you. And I just put at your place a memo, hot off the presses at 6:29 this evening from Mr. Kimmel, our municipal advisor with Ellers. In the packet, this is all really transpired very quickly in the last week. So I apologize for not having all the materials available for packet. But we received a request from the developers of the Mission Bowl project requesting an assignment of the rights and privileges included in the development agreement, including the use of the IRBs for the sales tax exemption on the purchase of construction materials. They're in the process of finalizing their construction loan and a private equity raise, and they anticipate forming a new project-specific entity, which would take title to and develop the project. So the development agreement allows for the assignment, as does the IRB resolution. In looking at this, so it's actually, interestingly enough, I, as city administrator, could assign the development agreement. Council has to assign the IRB, but in talking with the developer late last week, the timing of this, as they're moving toward closing on a construction loan, doesn't make any sense to separate them. So we just wanted to bring them both back for city council approval. The packet was updated at about 4:30 this afternoon with two different documents, which would be the documents which you would take action on at your April 20th meeting. And that the first one is just a memorandum of agreement, and that is the document that assigns the rights under the redevelopment agreement. And the second is a resolution which assigns the rights under of the IRB resolution, which is resolution 1066. So I'm just going to, because I know you haven't had a chance to really read and digest Bruce's memo, going to kind of hit some high points. And obviously we've got until your meeting on the 20th. I'm happy to answer any questions, or I know Mr. Kimmel or Mr. Heaven would be as well. So we did ask Bruce to do a due diligence review on the new equity group as a part of this, and identify any areas of potential concern regarding the collective commitment. So the Mission Bowl LLC entity is not getting out of the deal entirely, but they are taking a lower position with respect to that. And so we wanted Bruce to take a look at identifying any potential areas of concern regarding the collective commitment or capacity to develop and operate the project as proposed. You may remember that we actually assigned, so for example, on the locale, the EPC project, we assigned that to a different development entity, but that happened at a much different point in the process. So that was after construction, after lease up, after really about 97% occupancy. So Ellers has reviewed the proposed assignment, discussed it and the project status in detail with Banks Floodman and other members of the Sunflower Development Group. And they don't find any concerns that would cause Bruce, he doesn't find any concerns that would cause him to advise us that we not approve the proposed assignment. So he was reminding me earlier this week, as he does in his memo, that the developer's financing plan all along has anticipated a large proportion of the project equity to come in the form of third-party investors. And for those specific parties and ownership stakes to be refined and finalized as they move towards getting their construction financing in place. And so that's what's happening now. The current plan, in which residents on Rock Creek will provide 90% of project equity as a limited partner, and Mission Bowl will provide 10% of project equity, is not a meaningful departure, in his opinion, from what was anticipated when the city council approved the redevelopment agreement or the IRB resolution. So as the general partner, Mission Bowl Apartments, which is the group that Banks and the group that we've dealt with up to this point, will continue to hold 100% of the responsibility for the successful completion, lease up, and maintenance of the project. And it will be, that entity will be the sole guarantor of the $28 million bank loan, which they will be securing. And that is going to fund 70% of the total development cost. So there's no uncertainty through this assignment about who we go to, who's responsible. If there are other glitches or problems along the way, that remains the Mission Bowl Apartments LLC. In addition, Bruce had the opportunity to look at both their current bank financing term sheet and the proposed equity agreement. And they were able to confirm that the financing plan is consistent with Sunflower Group's explanation, and they are on track to close, to do a simultaneous closing later this month. The assignment documents are necessary in order to complete that successful closing. So again, he doesn't have any reservations with this assignment, but I would be happy to answer any questions. The one thing that I would note is that in the IRB resolution, it would in theory expire if the financing is not executed by July 1st. That seems like a little bit of a strange date, but I'll explain to you how we sort of backed into that date. So you'll recall that their development agreement was revised recently to extend the construction start date to May 1st. It is our intention, I've talked with the mayor, I mean, they are moving towards closing on this loan. They expect to be on site prior to May 1st. If there's nothing happening on the site on May 1st, we will send a formal notice of default on May 2nd, in which they have a period of time to cure that event of default. So something, takes a little bit longer in getting the construction documents signed. That July 1st date aligns with the cure period in that event of default. If they aren't, for whatever reason, wouldn't be able to cure that, which is not anything that we would anticipate, then we would be back to the drawing board anyway. So we don't want to assign the benefits for an indefinite period of time, but that's why we selected that window. Happy to answer any questions.
Laura, do we know if Bruce will be at the meeting on the 20th?
I can ask if he's available, if you have additional questions of him. I don't know that he's going to tell you anything different than, so you might want to, do you have other things you want?
No, but since Ellers has access to the financing sheet and the letters of interest, if we had questions at that point, he could just be by phone too.
I can certainly see if he's available.
Sure. Go ahead.
This in no way alters the schedule at this point.
No, it absolutely does not.
Thank you. I recommend that we go ahead and take this to council.
Non-consent.
Regular, yes.
Okay. Everybody okay with that? Okay. Thanks, Laura. Okay, the next we have a discussion item, and that would be by Emily Randall, and this is on the special events for 2022.
Good evening. Thank you. I just wanted to review for you some of the activities we're working on that are coming now that the weather is turning and spring is here. We have had some changes, some modifications. I think we've done a fairly good job of trying to keep the fun happening in Mission while we had a pandemic on our hands. But there've been some changes and also some new ideas and brainstorming going into 2022. So I wanted to just catch you up on some of those things. Certainly, we always appreciate when you understand what we have coming up so that you can share it with your constituents and that we can spread the word. We've had a nice time working as a staff on our kind of renewed and reinvigorated communication plan. And what I think it's done is, in my mind at least, gelled all of the offerings across departments. So we're working a lot more in tandem with parks from the admin and city hall side of things. And I think we offer our residents, our residents don't care what department's hosting any kind of an event, but there's something to do often in Mission, and we want to kind of celebrate that and share that with you. Most of the things on the list that was included in the meeting packet are things you're familiar with. We did give some thought to a couple of, we thought missing pieces, and there's still some of those that we'd like to focus on a little further. One of those was a service special event. I'm a big believer in some of the best clean fun you can have is through doing volunteer service work with either your neighbors or your family or your friends. And so we do offer the cleanup that you all know about on April 23rd. We've had an astounding response to that so far. We have more than 105 people who have signed up through the website. We'll all have a celebratory kind of kickoff here at Beverly Park, and then neighbors will kind of fan out across the areas that they are assigned to pick up litter, and thanks to Public Works and Parks for helping with some of those projects. So I think that will be a really nice new addition to our lineup. Also along the lines of working kind of closer together, the summer is just jam-packed, and Parks, I think, has so much offered to their credit, both at the outdoor pool and in their parks, that kind of some packaging of that and sharing that up ahead of many of the events coming. It's a lot to promote event by event, but we wanted to kind of kick off summer with an event we're calling the Mission Summer Sneak Peek that you may have seen on social media and elsewhere. It will be May 5th here again in the North parking lot. We've a long time heard requests for market Mother's Day kind of tie-in. So we're hosting a Mission market pop-up. It's really a preview. It's a smaller number of our vendors, but it's kind of targeted the week before Mother's Day. So people can come and buy Mother's Day gifts and that. But we're also going to be offering the community center again will be open following the renovations and all of the work that's been done here. So we'll be offering tours and highlighting different fitness programs that are available. You'll have a chance to purchase your outdoor aquatic facility pool pass. Just check that off your list and enter to win a free pass retroactively. So that'll be fun. It's Cinco de Mayo, coincidentally, but we are going to loop in the local business aspect with $5 coupons to Lelo's Salsa Grill or Estrella Azul, just as a fun nod to the fact that we know what date it is. So while supplies last, but that is just another element of it. So I think it'll be a really fun event that again, just kind of really gets everybody, you'll get a schedule, you'll get a handout for the aquatic center that'll really tell you about hours and that kind of information. So just kicks off the summer with all your information. I think of it as kind of kindergarten roundup, but for the summer for Missions events. So it's a can't miss event. And then also a couple of really fun additions that are not quite special events, but are really, I think, worthy of talking up to our residents at the aquatic center. We know that there's always the push and pull between lap swim and open swim. The aquatic staff has pulled together what we're calling lunch laps, which is from 11 to noon every day of the week beginning June 15th, where people can come in and all of the lanes will be open to just pure lap lane swimming. So that's 8 beautiful lanes of swimming for people uninterrupted for that hour over the lunch hour if they'd like to do that. So that's a fun offering to kind of a different demographic for our pool. The couple of moonlight swims, we know that's kind of a nostalgic throwback people have missed. So we'll have those a couple of times this year where the pool will be open after dark when the lights come on, and it'll be really fun for everybody. And then under the sea pool party, which is movie night and activities and fun and extended hours there. what am I missing? So we moved the picnic back to July. So that'll be there in Broadmoor Park again. Without the fireworks, we're just going to have a picnic and it'll be great, just like it was last year in October. So tell all your friends that it'll just be fantastic. And then you'll see the rest of them on there. I don't know that we need to call a lot of them out. We'll be adding more to it. We do think there's still kind of the need to examine how the common consumption permit plays into what we want to offer. We've been talking with the Mission Business District about what they are already offering and how the city can promote that for them or help them just, get a better sense of bandwidth for what they're already trying to do with a lot of, limited capacity on the behalf of the business owners. So if they're doing something, can we help elevate it or promote it or work in tandem together without it being something that is so overwhelming that it, causes burnout and difficulty. So figuring out what those are is still to come, but I think we're poised for a lot of fun coming up in the months ahead. So more to come on that, but wanted to just share.
Thank you. Can I ask you a couple questions, Emily?
Yeah.
We're going to be having the market every Thursday night, correct?
Yes.
And that on the website, we'll be announcing that because it's just in June here.
Yes, right, for sure. Every Thursday in June, July, and August. So it's 13 weeks from 4:30 to 8, just like we've done in the past. This is just a pop-up, like a separate.
This is great. I've got this on my refrigerator already.
Good.
Quick question. Is there any way on the website to basically, if people are looking there for events and what they want to go to, where there's a cost? So they know
yeah.
they don't,
Sure.
put 4 kids in the car and then find out it's more than what they planned on, or it's free and they're thrilled.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a special events page on the site and we can just add costs to that page. That'd be easy to do. And
Thank
then
you.
additionally on the calendar as well.
Great job, Emily.
Yeah,
Great
sure.
job.
That's great. Thanks.
Anybody have questions for Emily? Comments? Great job.
See you there.
Okay, and under other, we have one item, and it's a consideration for a field trip to the Johnson County Museum, the Red Line exhibit by Laura Smith.
So this is something that the mayor had suggested we might want to talk about to see if we wanted to kind of do a little outing as a group with council or staff or anybody that was interested. If you're not familiar, that Red Line exhibit really takes you on a deep dive into the history of redlining and how it shaped and was shaped by both Johnson County and the region. And it's had really positive reviews from the folks that I've heard that have been able to visit that. So we just wanted to talk tonight. I think it would be a good addition and help support some of the conversations that the racial equity work that we're doing. And, we'll be bringing back that more fully in the coming months for your consideration. I did look up the museum's hours and they aren't great compared to workday schedules potentially for many, but it looks like the museum is open Monday through Saturday from 9 to 4:30. So it may be something that we might want to consider a lunch, an opportunity to get together for lunch. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't know what our preference is, how we want to coordinate it. We've all got a lot going on and Emily just added a whole lot to everybody's calendars, but what's your pleasure? What's your preference?
I think it's a great idea. Lunch sounds good, but we could also consider like a 3 to 4:30 tour end of day. And then we all go and grab an early dinner or something. That's just another thought on a Wednesday that we're already used to. I know that can be challenging for people's work schedules, but if it's far enough out, I know I could work it.
Yeah, same. If I had enough notice, I could take off during work.
Okay. All right.
Yes, we could just send some date options.
Okay,
Maybe
we'll
if
send some
there's
date
interest.
options. Absolutely.
Great. Is that it, Laura, on that?
That is on that option, yes.
Okay, so lastly, we have department updates, and that would be Laura Smith.
Just a few. Just a reminder that this Saturday, for anybody who signed up for the Climate Action Summit, that is this Saturday. April is here, which is hard to believe. So I know there's the expo in the morning, and then the summit itself, I believe, starts at 1 o'clock. If you need more information on the specific times or programs, let us know, and we'll circulate an email. So you've got that information close at hand. If the weather cooperates tomorrow, we're pouring the tennis courts. Although we love this spring rain, it has delayed that project. So Friday now, I'm sorry. So Friday now. Okay. Then if you happen to be by Anderson Park, you'll notice that we're installing a French drain and some new edging around that playground. That's a playground area that has long held water. And so making some improvements to that before we put the new playground surfacing in for this season. So we'll continue, and you'll see in your next project status update. I mean, that emphasis that Penn and his staff have placed on just routine park maintenance, I think is really starting to make a difference and pay off in our parks. So kudos to them. Before we are together again, so I know I ask everybody to hold every Wednesday, but guess what? You get next Wednesday off. But that will also be the 13th, April 13th is the kickoff of the 7 days, where you'll recall we have signed up again to be a 7-day supportive city. And we have a couple of events that are slated for that. So it's actually 7 days that occur over the course of 12, which confused me for a while, but it's to help align with school schedules. So we will be having a blood drive here at the community center on Monday, the 18th. And if you come and donate blood, I read today, you get a free buntini from Nothing Bunt Cakes. So that should be reason in and of itself to come donate blood if you're able. The one event, and we'll be putting out a bigger picture preview of this. We're finalizing, I think most of you are familiar. We have one of the Parade of Hearts down at our Mission Market site. And so we've been talking with the artist about that heart, and our heart, and a lot of people don't know this, but our heart is actually entitled Grateful. And so in looking at the artist's message and thinking about the water running through the hands, his message is water is life, and for life I'm grateful. Running through my hands, I take what I need and the rest pours on by. I believe a heart full of gratitude is one that falls into accord with the universe. If my painting reminds any person to reaffirm their gratitude for anything, I believe it's lived its purpose. And so we felt like that message aligned so perfectly with the themes and the messaging of the 7 Days Supportive City. And so we reached out to him about trying to do something to help showcase that. We've had over 1,900 people that have checked in since that heart was placed on site. If you download the app, you can check in and you can kind of see, but I know Jay Flares says he sees people all day long coming by to take photos, but the artist was very excited about trying to do something to help promote that. And so what we're trying to coordinate right now is basically just, we were talking about a gratitude wall and we couldn't pull it off, but a gratitude sidewalk. So he's going to help us, I think, do, I'm grateful for along the market sidewalk, and people will have the opportunity to go down and just add their own thoughts to that. And then either through a drone operator that he may have available, or we do have a drone as a city, we'll take some drone footage of that and be able to help promote it. But what we'd really love to do is on April 20th, which would, maybe around 5:45 in advance of our council meeting that evening, is to invite the council down to the site, take a group photo, add our gratitude, and just sort of help celebrate that. So that's kind of our midweek event. And then the community cleanup, which Emily has said is just taken off. I'm so excited to know we have over 100 people who will be out and about in the community on Saturday, the 23rd, making a difference. So that's coming up before we are formally together again. A reminder, I think you received an email today from our retreat facilitator for the retreat on May 7th. So if you would please reach out to Patty and schedule a time so she can get a one-on-one interview scheduled with you. Most of you probably also received an email from Pros Consulting, who is the group that is doing our community center feasibility study about kind of a similar stakeholder interview. So if the times don't work, let me know and we'll make sure we get you your feedback coordinated. I think the only other thing I have is no meeting next week, but we will have a work session on the 27th. And it is slated at this time to be kind of our first foray into the conversation around our Parks and Recreation sales tax. And then in May, you can expect us to kind of kick off our preliminary budget discussions. And that's, I think, all I have this evening.
Great. Any comments or questions for Laura? Would it be possible if we had an interested group in the community go bid on that heart in May when they come down?
Yeah, absolutely. I have to read what they go. I've been trying to do a little bit of research. I don't know if it's an online auction or
In person?
in-person auction, but
It just looks really good where it is. I don't think it should move.
Laura, is that something where we could potentially add an auction item to authorize a budget at our April meeting? I think, or maybe our May meeting, because I think the auction is June, but
should be June. Let me.
Maybe someone at Water One could help with that since it's a water related heart.
I like it. Kenzie and I are, she decided she wants.
Okay, it is now 8:59 PM, and with no further discussion, that concludes the meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee. Again, this video will be made public on our website at missionks.org. Thank you for your attendance.